In the heart of a picturesque town nestled among rolling hills and meandering streams, I spent my childhood in a world untouched by the glittering allure of city life. Our modest, weathered home, with its creaking wooden floors and windows framing fields that stretched endlessly, was a sanctuary of simplicity and familial warmth. It was there that my story began. My parents, though of modest means, were profoundly rich in wisdom and compassion. My father, a skilled carpenter, shaped more than furniture with his worn but gentle hands. He also instilled in me the values of diligence and humility. My mother, a dedicated schoolteacher, filled our home with books and stories that sparked my imagination and nurtured my dreams. Life in our little town unfolded at an unhurried pace, marked by genuine connections and shared joys. Neighbors exchanged warm greetings, and community events brought us together in celebration. I cherished the simple pleasures of our life, the earthy aroma after rain, the rustle of leaves underfoot, and the melodic symphony of birds at dawn. It was in our quaint local library that I first met David. He stood out instantly, a visitor from the city, his presence marked by an effortless sophistication. Yet, beneath that polished exterior was a kindness that set him apart. His family was renowned in business circles, their wealth and influence stretching far and wide. Yet, David seemed refreshingly unpretentious, listening intently as I recounted the seemingly mundane stories of my small-town life. Our initial conversations were cautious, like two worlds testing the waters of each other's realities. David spoke of the city's ceaseless energy, dazzling lights, and boundless opportunities, while I described the quiet charm of our annual harvest festival, tranquil strolls by the stream, and the strength of our tight-knit community. We soon found ourselves drawn to the old park bench by the lake, where we would sit for hours, sharing our worlds. The lake, its still waters reflecting the changing sky, bore silent witness to the bond that grew between us, a connection that bridged the divide of our disparate lives. "Nancy," David confided one evening, his voice tinged with a rare vulnerability, "I've always been surrounded by people who value wealth and status above all else. But you've shown me a different kind of richness, a life that's genuine and full of warmth." His words touched something deep within me. "David, it's not where we come from that defines us, but who we are when we're together. You've opened my eyes to dreams I never dared to imagine." As our relationship deepened, David shared his concerns about introducing me to his family, especially his mother. "She has strong opinions about who I should be with," he admitted, worry etched on his face. "We'll face it together," I assured him. "Love transcends expectations, it's about choosing each other despite the odds." The day he proposed was beautifully understated. Just like our love, under a canopy of stars, David made a heartfelt promise of a life together. I knew then that our journey was just beginning. When the evening came to meet his family, my nerves were palpable. Their grand estate stood as a stark reminder of the differences between our worlds. Sensing my apprehension, David squeezed my hand and whispered, "Just be yourself, Nancy, that's all that matters." Inside, we were greeted by his mother, Warla, an elegant yet austere woman whose sharp gaze quickly appraised me. A flicker of disapproval crossed her face before she spoke. "So, this is the young lady my son has spoken of. An interesting choice, David," she said with a thin smile. Dinner was an elaborate affair, the table laden with delicacies unfamiliar to me. Warla's polite veneer masked pointed jabs. "I imagine these dishes are quite exotic for someone from your background," she remarked, feigning concern. "Would you prefer something simpler?" I held my composure, responding with quiet resolve, "Thank you, but I'm always eager to try new things." Her scrutiny intensified as the evening wore on. She examined my simple, but carefully chosen dress. "Is that considered formal attire where you're from? It must be challenging to find something appropriate on a modest budget." David intervened, attempting to redirect the conversation, but his mother persisted. "Tell me, Nancy, what do your parents do? It's always fascinating to hear about different walks of life." "My father is a carpenter, and my mother is a schoolteacher," I replied, steady but aware of her implied judgment. "How quaint," she said, her tone dripping with condescension. "Hardworking people, I'm sure, though I suppose they couldn't provide much of a financial head start." Her veiled insults extended to my upbringing, my parents' professions, and even my income, which she seemed to know far too much about. Mrs. Eleanor's revelation sent a ripple of astonished murmurs through the room. Warla's face, normally composed and imperious, flushed a deep crimson as she visibly stiffened. "Yes, you worked hard to build the life you have now," Mrs. Eleanor continued, her voice unwavering, "but that does not give you the right to look down on others." Nancy is a woman of integrity, kindness, and strength. She reminds me of the woman I once saw in you, Orla, before you let pride and status cloud your judgment. The tension in the room was palpable. Guests exchanged glances, and some nodded in quiet agreement. My parents, sitting at the corner of the room, looked at me with a mixture of pride and relief, their hands clasped tightly together. Mrs. Eleanor turned to me then, her kind eyes meeting mine. Nancy, my dear, you are a breath of fresh air in this family. You have brought out the best in David, and I, for one, am grateful for it. You carry yourself with grace even in the face of cruelty, and that is the mark of true strength. Do not let anyone, ever, make you feel unworthy. She raised her glass high, a commanding gesture that drew the attention of every guest in the room. So, let us toast, not to wealth or status, but to love, humility, and the courage to build a future together. To Nancy and David. The room erupted into applause, first hesitant, then growing stronger as guests joined in, many rising to their feet. I felt tears sting my eyes, overwhelmed by the unexpected support. David squeezed my hand tightly, his expression one of gratitude and determination. Orla sat frozen in her chair, her usual sharp demeanor now subdued by a mix of shame and discomfort. For once, she had no biting retort, no condescending remarks. It was as if Mrs. Eleanor's words had stripped away the veneer of superiority she clung to so fiercely. After the applause settled, David stood, his voice steady and resolute. Thank you, Grandma. And thank you, Nancy, for being the extraordinary person you are. I promise to always stand by you, no matter what challenges we face. The rest of the evening shifted noticeably. Guests approached me with kind words and encouragement, and even David's father, Jackson, offered a heartfelt apology for Orla's behavior. The warmth and camaraderie that filled the room felt like a salve, mending the wounds inflicted earlier. As David and I danced under the twinkling lights, the music soft and soothing, he leaned in close, his voice a whisper meant only for me. I'm so proud of you, Nancy. You're everything I could ever hope for, and more. I rested my head against his shoulder, the weight of the day lifting as we swayed together. The road ahead wouldn't be without its struggles, but in that moment, surrounded by the hum of laughter and the glow of love, I knew we could weather anything together. David's mother's face turned ashen, her composure cracking under the weight of Mrs. Eleanor's unyielding words. For someone who once worked as a maid to stand here and ridicule another for their humble beginnings is not just ironic but profoundly hypocritical, Mrs. Eleanor declared, her voice firm yet measured. The room was steeped in silence, every eye fixed on her. A ripple of shock spread among the guests, their murmurs barely audible. Moira's usual air of superiority was replaced by visible discomfort as she sank deeper into her chair. You, more than anyone, should understand the value of hard work and perseverance. Instead of deriding Nancy for her background, you should celebrate her integrity and resilience, Mrs. Eleanor continued, her gaze unwavering. In this family, we honor character over wealth and kindness over status. Nancy embodies these values, and I am proud to call her my granddaughter-in-law. As her words echoed through the room, the tension dissolved into a thunderous applause. Guests, many of whom had remained silent earlier, now rose to their feet, clapping enthusiastically. David's mother sat motionless, her earlier confidence replaced by a stunned humility. For the first time that evening, she had no retort, and to be honest, I didn't feel the least bit sorry for her. David leaned over to whisper, his voice filled with admiration. I didn't know Grandma had it in her to stand up like that. I smiled, squeezing his hand. She's incredible. The remainder of the reception was transformed. Guests approached us with warm smiles and congratulations, their earlier hesitance replaced by genuine support. The evening, once overshadowed by tension, now brimmed with camaraderie and joy. It felt as though Mrs. Eleanor's words had cleansed the air, dismantling the carefully constructed facade of a cruel woman. Days later, a family reckoning. The aftermath of the wedding left lingering tension within David's family. The final reckoning came during a family meeting at Mrs. Eleanor's stately home. The room was thick with expectation as everyone gathered, the weight of unspoken words palpable. Mrs. Eleanor wasted no time, addressing Moira with the same unflinching candor she had displayed at the wedding. What you did at the reception was unacceptable. It was an affront to this family's values and, more importantly, to Nancy. Your behavior cannot be excused. Moira, visibly smaller without her usual confidence, tried to defend herself. I've already apologized to Nancy. What more do you want? Mrs. Eleanor's tone sharpened. This isn't just about an apology, it's about accountability. You've grown far too comfortable living off this family's wealth without contributing anything meaningful. That ends today. David's father, Jackson, who rarely spoke against his wife, nodded solemnly. Mother's right. You've taken advantage of the family's support for far too long. Moira's jaw dropped. You can't be serious, Jackson. You're my husband, you're supposed to stand by me. But Jackson's expression remained firm. I am standing by you, by helping you realize that your behavior has consequences. This is long overdue. Mrs. Eleanor delivered the final blow. Effective immediately, all financial support will cease. You will need to find a job and learn to live within your means. It's time you rediscover the value of hard work and humility. Moira's face twisted in disbelief and outrage. You can't just cut me off like this. How am I supposed to manage? David, who had remained quiet until now, spoke with a calm yet firm resolve. Mom, this isn't a punishment, it's a wake-up call. You need to understand the impact of your actions, not just on Nancy but on this family as a whole. I sat quietly, observing the scene unfold with a mix of relief and quiet satisfaction. David's hand found mine under the table, his grip reassuring and steady. Moira, meanwhile, was left speechless, a rare and almost comical sight. She glanced around the room, seeking support, but found none. As the meeting concluded, the gravity of her new reality seemed to finally sink in. She sat, stunned and silent, while the rest of us began to disperse. On the way out, David leaned toward me, a mischievous glint in his eyes. I never thought I'd see the day Mom would be rendered speechless. I chuckled softly, unable to resist a smile. Maybe this is exactly what she needs to change. As we stepped into the crisp evening air, I felt a cautious hope take root. Perhaps this marked the beginning of something new, not just for Moira but for the entire family. And as David's hand tightened around mine, I knew we could face whatever came next, together.